November 1st, 1755. It's All Saints' Day in Lisbon, one of the richest and most devout cities in Europe. The churches are filled to capacity for morning mass. Suddenly, the ground begins to heave violently. For 10 terrifying minutes, an earthquake, now estimated to be around an 8.5 magnitude, rips through the city. Stone cathedrals, packed with worshippers, crumble into dust. Palaces and homes collapse in on themselves. But the horror is far from over. Survivors who fled to the open space of the waterfront look up to see the sea recede, exposing the harbor floor. Then, a series of colossal tsunamis, some reaching 20 meters high, crash back into the shore, sweeping away thousands. As if that wasn't enough, the countless candles lit for the holiday have been knocked over, igniting fires that raged for 5 days, consuming what little remained of the city. By the time the smoke clears, an estimated 60,000 people are dead, and Lisbon lies in ruins. This catastrophe was more than just a physical disaster. It was an intellectual and spiritual earthquake that sent shockwaves across Europe. Why? Because it directly challenged the dominant philosophy of the time, optimism. This wasn't the glass-half-full optimism we talk about today. This was a sophisticated philosophical doctrine, most famously championed by the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Leibniz argued that because God is perfectly good, rational, and all-powerful, the world he created must be the best of all possible worlds. Every event, no matter how tragic it seems to us, is part of a divine, preordained harmony. Sickness, war, natural disasters, all of it, in the grand scheme of things, served a greater purpose, even if we couldn't comprehend it. This idea was incredibly influential during the Enlightenment, a period defined by reason, progress, and a belief in a benevolent, clockmaker God who had set the universe in motion according to perfect, rational laws. The Lisbon earthquake shattered this clockwork universe. How could a benevolent God allow such indiscriminate slaughter, especially on a holy day, in the heart of a devoutly Catholic city? Why were the pious, praying in churches, crushed to death, while the brothels in the city's less reputable districts largely survived? The randomness and sheer scale of the suffering seemed to mock the idea of a just and orderly cosmos. The tragedy of Lisbon forced thinkers to confront a terrible question. If this is the best of all possible worlds, what must the others be like? No one articulated this intellectual crisis more sharply than the French philosopher, Voltaire. He had previously explored Leibniz's ideas, but Lisbon changed everything. In his poem, On the Lisbon Disaster, he directly attacks the optimists. He asks them, will you say, this is the result of eternal laws directing the acts of a free and good God? Will you say, in the face of this heap of victims, God is avenged, their death is the price of their crimes? For Voltaire, explaining away such immense suffering with abstract philosophical platitudes was not just illogical, it was cruel. The comfortable assertion that all is for the best was an insult to the dead and dying. He saw the optimists as disconnected intellectuals, fiddling with theories while a city burned. He famously wrote, Lisbon is in ruins, and they dance in Paris. Voltaire would later immortalize his critique in his brilliant satirical novella, Candide, or Optimism, published just a few years after the earthquake. The story follows the naive young Candide, who is taught by his tutor, Dr. Pangloss, a caricature of a Leibnizian philosopher, that all is for the best, in this best of all possible worlds. Candide then endures a relentless series of horrific events, war, torture, disease, and yes, he even finds himself in Lisbon during the 1755 earthquake. Throughout his ordeal, Pangloss stubbornly tries to justify every new horror as part of the grand, harmonious plan. After the earthquake, Pangloss explains that it was necessary because the harbor of Lisbon was formed so that the Anabaptist jock could be drowned in it. It's absurd, and that's the point. Voltaire uses dark humor to show how ridiculous and heartless the philosophy of optimism becomes when faced with real, brutal human suffering. Candide eventually rejects Pangloss's blind optimism, concluding not that everything is for the best, but that we must simply cultivate our garden, a call to abandon abstract speculation and focus on practical, tangible actions to improve our own small corner of the world. But the reaction wasn't purely philosophical outrage. The Lisbon earthquake also marked a major turning point in how we study the natural world. While some religious figures declared the disaster was divine punishment for the city's sins, others began looking for a natural, scientific explanation. This was a radical shift. Instead of asking why did God do this, people started asking how did this happen? One of the most important figures in this shift was a young Immanuel Kant, who was then a tutor in Prussia. Far from the devastation, fascinated by the reports, Kant collected all the available information and published 3 separate papers on the earthquake. He meticulously analyzed eyewitness accounts to theorize about the causes of earthquakes, proposing they were caused by the shifting of vast caverns filled with hot gases beneath the Earth's surface. Now, his specific theory was wrong, but his method was revolutionary. He was treating the earthquake not as a supernatural act of God, but as a natural phenomenon that could be studied. understood, and perhaps even predicted through reason and empirical evidence. Kant was laying the groundwork for the modern science of seismology. It was a move away from theology and metaphysics toward physics and geology. The earthquake forced humanity to look for answers not in the heavens, but under their own feet. This brings us to the profound and lasting legacy of that terrible day in 1755. The Lisbon earthquake didn't just destroy a city. It helped demolish an entire worldview built on divine providence and a preordained cosmic order. It exposed the universe as something not necessarily benevolent or rational, but often random, chaotic, and indifferent to human suffering. This was a terrifying realization, but it was also liberating. By severing the direct link between natural events and divine will, the earthquake helped to secularize Western thought. If God wasn't directly responsible for every gust of wind and tremor of the earth, then humanity was left to figure things out for itself. We became responsible for our own fate, for building safer cities, for helping each other in times of crisis, for creating our own meaning in a world that didn't provide it ready-made. The famous Marquis of Pombal, who was Portugal's prime minister at the time, embodied this new spirit. When asked what was to be done in the aftermath, he reportedly gave a simple, pragmatic answer: bury the dead and heal the living. There was no time for theological debate. There was only the immediate, practical need to rebuild and recover. This response is considered the birth of modern crisis management. In a way, the intellectual journey that began in the rubble of Lisbon leads directly to the existentialist thinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries. The idea that we are condemned to be free, that we are born into a universe without inherent meaning and must therefore create our own values, has its roots in this shattering moment. The earthquake forced us to confront the absurd, the gap between our human desire for meaning and the silent, indifferent universe. So the next time you hear about an earthquake, remember Lisbon in 1755. It was a tragedy of unimaginable proportions, but it was also a crucible from which our modern world was forged. It taught us that relying on blind faith in a best of all worlds is a fragile defense against reality. It pushed us toward science, toward self-reliance, and toward the humbling, yet empowering, realization that we are the ones who must tend to our own garden. It was the disaster that forced us to grow up. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this exploration of history and philosophy interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what you think. Could a single event have such a massive impact today? See you next time.